The day the sirens fell silent over Terezina, the air itself seemed to recoil from memory, as though sound could still be scorched. 8 years of war had wrung the sky dry of color, leaving only a tarnished bronze glare that settled over the ruins like a permanent dusk. In the cracked shells of buildings, wind threaded itself through shattered windows and whispered in cadences that once belonged to children running to school. Street vendors singing peppery promises, lovers calling each other's names across balconies, painted the soft green of old optimism. Now the balconies were jagged ribs, and the voices were gone, and the city waited, half asleep, half afraid, to learn what kind of ghost it was meant to become. Theo Costa stepped through the twisted iron gates of what had been the Benjamin Constant Botanical Garden and felt every absence at once. Before the bombs, the garden had unfurled across 3 city blocks. A disciplined jungle, a curated delirium of scent and humidity. He remembered crowding into the orchid wing as a boy just to watch a swarm of swallowtails pivot in midair, wings lit like stained glass windows catching sudden sunlight. He remembered the old curator, Dona Lucinda, insisting that every plant told a story whether or not it spoke a human tongue. She had pressed a seed the size of a tear into his palm when he was 9, saying only, "Write something with this." He had kept it years later, through evacuations and ration cards and the quiet devouring of everything that once seemed obvious. Now he crouched in the center of the domed conservatory, the glass panes long since spider-webbed and blackened, and set to work. Around him, where manicured paths had forked across mossy lawns, he had dug narrow trenches in careful, deliberate arcs, every groove disguised beneath a layer of dust and scattered masonry. The soil was hungry. He could feel it quiver when he pressed his spade into the earth. He whispered the Latin names as he planted: Hymenaea Kerberal, Berthelicia excelsa, Cryptocorin times Willizii. Each seed was an old promise, each root a filament of possibility he refused to surrender. He watered sparingly from a dented can, droplets darkening the dirt like fresh ink. Night bled into the garden without ceremony. Lanterns were prohibited now. Light drew drones, drones drew soldiers, soldiers drew the kind of silence from which nobody returned. But Theo's eyes had learned the shapes of darkness. He recognized the silhouette that slipped between 2 columns where ghost vines clung like skeletal fingers. "Stop there," he said, voice low. The silhouette froze. Then a whisper, "It's me." Theo exhaled. Vera Mendez emerged, pushing back a hood sewn from scavenged parachute silk. Her forearms were sleeved in tattoos, a cartography of extinct rivers, and streaked with powdered brick. She had been salvaging circuit boards from the university's collapsed engineering block all afternoon. Copper dust still glimmered in her hair. "Another patrol tore up Sapukaya Street," she reported. "They say the brigade wants the entire west quarter leveled. Training grounds for their recruits." Theo closed his eyes. The brigade, local enforcers turned occupiers turned self-proclaimed government, had spent the last year cracking the city open to see what it would bleed. They swore allegiance to whichever superpower shouted loudest that week, trading scrap metal and conscripted bodies for bullets. Now they wanted the garden, a wasteland, to their eyes, bulldozed so tanks could practice maneuvers. Vera glanced at the furrows where seeds slept. "How long until these show green?" 2, maybe 3 weeks. Theo murmured. "If the soil holds moisture, if the aquifer's still alive, if..." He let the rest evaporate. Hope was a fragile thesis. You cited conditions carefully. She crouched, touching the dirt with reverence. "Then we don't give them 3 weeks. At first it was rumor. A botanist digging trenches beneath shattered glass. A mechanic rewiring old metro junctions. A retired cartographer sewing maps into blanket linings. People whispered of a network rooting beneath the brigade's boots. Unseen, inexorable. They called it the Green Vein, though no one could name its leaders or trace its arteries. The brigade hanged 3 teenagers on Avenida Free Seraphim for scattering seed packets like forbidden pamphlets. The bodies swung for 2 days while dust piled on their shoes. Still the rumors multiplied like spores. Theo met Ana Duarte, once a hydrologist, in the wine cellar of a restaurant whose top floors had been flensed away by missile fire. She carried test tubes sloshing luminous algae that could, she claimed, convert stale reservoir water into something drinkable with enough sunlight and glass shards. In the glow, he saw how her gaze flicked past him, mapping exits, searching for leakages in her newfound coalition. Trust was an extinct species, yet she was willing to gamble on a resurrection. They marked the first tunnel the following dawn, prying loose a manhole cover 3 blocks south of the garden. The old stormwater conduits had survived the bombardment. The city's skeleton was stubborn. Inside, Theo felt the air cool and steady, as if entering the lung of some vast subterranean creature. Murals, spray-painted decades earlier by activists demanding public transit, still glimmered under streaks of mineral seepage, fists sprouting vines, hearts cracking open to reveal glossy seeds. Children once rode skateboards here. Now Theo brushed away cobwebs from an inscription. "Your roots are louder than their sirens." He smiled despite himself. The tunnels would become arteries of resistance, carrying water, seedlings, messages. They would live where light could not follow. The cell grew. Lucas, a former geology student, could read the vibrations of distant tank columns through cracks in asphalt. Bia, who had sung at the opera house before shrapnel took half her voice, now embedded coded instructions in shards of melody drifting across shortwave frequencies. They shared nothing superfluous. Names were traded like heirloom seeds, sparingly with ceremony stored deep. Each night they carried sacks of loam filched from riverbanks and layered the conservatory beds, coaxing rain barrels to drip while drones hummed overhead. Theo watched the first sprout push upward, a gimlet of chlorophyll slicing the dust. He touched it like a newborn pulse. The brigade might command rifles and ration depots, but here was a weapon calibrated to a longer patience. Roots could split concrete given time. Time, however, was exactly what the brigade intended to erase. One humid afternoon, when thunderheads slouched over the southern hills, a convoy of half-armored trucks choked the boulevard that hemmed the garden. Tower loudspeakers barked edicts. All civilians to evacuate within 48 hours. Unauthorized entry henceforth punishable by summary execution. A bulldozer's blade gleamed oil-black in the gathering storm. Theo and Vera watched from the ragged shell of a department store, the mannequins behind them, armless, eyeless, tilting like anxious jurors. "They'll start at dawn," Vera said. "Fewer eyes then." Theo traced the bulldozer's silhouette against the dull horizon. It reminded him of a predator insect. Heavy, patient, armored in ignorance. "We have one night," he said, "to make the ground speak." Underground, in the stale light of battery lamps, the cell convened. Anna unfolded a map stitched from bedsheet strips, an aerial view of the garden and the avenues hemming it, annotated with soil depth, drainage lines, subterranean voids where old metro spurs had collapsed but not filled. Lucas tapped the map, reading the intersections where earth was weak, where pressure could coax a sink into being. "We won't stop them with bullets," Anna said. "We'll stop them with what we have: gravity, capillarity, decay. Let the ground swallow their machines." Theo listened, heart pummeling his ribs. The plan was audacious: nurture the soil until it betrayed the oppressor. They would soak specific corridors overnight, divert gray water reservoirs into thirsty substrata, destabilize the pavement so that when the bulldozers advanced, the earth would buckle. Bia hummed a minor key, almost imperceptible, while she soldered copper fragments into a tangle that would detonate canisters of nutrient gel. A bloom of sudden slime that expanded 30-fold in contact with air, lubricating fissures. She couldn't sing her old repertoire anymore. Her voice cracked around missing notes. But here, underground, she found harmonies in circuitry, cantatas in slow chemical release. Vera distributed small burlap pouches to each member. Inside, dozens of seeds the color of dried blood. "Redirect any brigade patrol," she instructed. "Scatter these in their wake. They germinate in 48 hours, roots like barbed wire. At worst, they tangle treads. At best, they remind the city where loyalty should lie." Theo pocketed the pouch. The seeds were hybridized by a geneticist who had vanished after last winter's purges. They were engineered for aggression. Roots secreting mild acids that etched asphalt surfaces, stems that coiled around anything upright. Theo felt a tremor of guilt. Dona Lucinda had taught him plants were stories of healing. But stories could be cautionary, too. Even the gentlest species learned defense. The team dispersed through the tunnels. Theo moved with stealth he never knew he possessed, emerging in the lot behind the tax office, unscrewing a maintenance hydrant, channeling water into flexible tubing that vanished below street level. He imagined veins feeding a giant heart. Above, lightning stitched the clouds, and the smell of imminent rain sharpened every sense. Around midnight, he returned to the garden. Raindrops began to fall, slow and solitary, tapping the fractured glass overhead. He stood among the beds, serried sprouts quivering under placebo moonlight. Somewhere beyond the walls, cannonades rumbled. Maybe thunder, maybe artillery. Distinctions blurred these days. "You're talking to them, aren't you?" a voice said. Theo turned. A boy no older than 13 slouched by a fallen column, barefoot, eyes bright with defiance. He held a cracked smartphone like a talisman. "I've seen you here, every night. You whisper to the seedlings." Theo shrugged. "Maybe they listen. Can I help?" the boy asked, the words brittle with the fear of refusal. "I'm good at small spaces. Rats taught me." He grinned without humor. Theo studied him, the ribs ghosting through a threadbare shirt, the cheap watch face strapped to his ankle like a secret compass. Survival had forged children into volunteers for impossible tasks. "What's your name?" "Call me Nilo," he said. Theo nodded. "All right, Nilo. Find every broken gutter on this block and jam it with leaves so the rain floods the soil lines we cut." "Can you do that?" The boy saluted with mock ceremony. "Roots louder than sirens," he recited, and sprinted into the downpour. Theo closed his eyes and let the rain baptize his face. In the distance, sirens did rise, drones returning to base, gauging anomalies with algorithmic scorn. But the rain hammered louder, and in that percussion he heard drums older than war, older than conquest, older than any sky that had forgotten how to bloom blue. Dawn crawled across Terrazina with reluctant pallor. Theo crouched behind a toppled fig tree trunk, watching the brigade convoy align at the boulevard's edge. The bulldozer idled, exhaust curling like sullen incense. Soldiers in mismatched fatigues checked rifles, laughter clenched tight between bared teeth. The first tread lurched forward. Pavement cracked, a fissure radiating like a lightning scar. Theo held his breath. The dozer advanced another meter, then sagged, abruptly, as though kneeling to some unseen monarch. Concrete groaned, collapsed, swallowing half the machine in a slurry of mud and shattered pipe. Soldiers shouted, scrambling backward. Another truck tilted as the ground liquefied beneath its wheels. Buried gelatin canisters ruptured, disgorging a viscous tide that clung to boots and tires with predatory hunger. Vera's voice crackled in Theo's earpiece. "Sinkhole at Sector 3. Pull back from the south window. We detonated early to avoid collateral." Theo signaled Nilo, who scurried along the perimeter scattering crimson seeds like a priest of silent benedictions. On the boulevard, panic fractured command hierarchy. A captain screamed orders that dissolved in the metallic screech of a collapsing lamppost. Then suddenly the street fell still. The bulldozer, half submerged and listing, hissed as coolant met groundwater. The brigade withdrew, dragging wounded, leaving the machine to drown. For a long moment the city exhaled. It sounded like leaves rustling, small, almost bashful. Theo stepped into the open, mud sucking at his boots. The garden stood intact behind him, seedlings trembling in the breeze. He felt a surge of fierce tenderness, as if every sprout had grown teeth he was sworn to protect. Anna emerged from a sewer grate, goggles smeared with slime. "First skirmish won," she said, incredulous. "First," Theo agreed. "Not last." He gazed at the horizon, where clouds dispersed to reveal a sliver of untainted blue. It looked fragile, the way a new leaf looks fragile seconds before you realize it's stronger than steel. Because leaves do not surrender to gravity. They master it, twisting sunward again and again, rewriting the angle of fall as ascent. Theo thought of Dona Lucinda's seed in his coat pocket, still unplanted all these years. A story yet to be told. He began to walk toward the conservatory, every step a vow. The thunderstorm that drowned the bulldozer was still rolling west when the brigade came back with torches. They arrived 3 nights later in near-perfect silence, masked against the stench of their own burn accelerant, moving like a column of moths hungry for flame. Torchlight rippled across the gutted facades, staining everything the color of cauterized flesh. From a rooftop 2 blocks away, Theo tracked their progress through a makeshift telescope, broken lens, taped barrel, while Vera whispered wind speed and humidity into his ear. Rain again, maybe, but not soon enough to matter. The brigade's target was no longer just the garden. It was the idea that dirt could still belong to people who refused to buy it back in blood. Below, the conservatory dome glimmered in moonlight like a cracked amphora, each shard of glass a note in a brittle chord. Inside, seedlings had already woven a green lattice so dense it seemed to generate its own breath. Anna's translucent algae towers pulsed with slow turquoise light, pumping filtered water into hundreds of terraced trays. The place no longer resembled a ruin so much as a wound mid-cicatrization, a scab that promised skin. Burning it now would be psychological warfare, the brigade's favorite grammar. Theo felt a palm close over his shoulder. Lucas, mud-smeared and hollow-eyed, had sprinted from the tunnels below to deliver the latest tremor reading. 17 pairs of boots, he murmured, voice brittle. Light, but steady. Plus 2 flats, carts maybe. Fuel drums, Vera guessed. She lowered her rangefinder. Or defoliant tanks. They've decided the ground itself is treason. Theo's knuckles whitened around the telescope barrel. Then the ground will answer. He gave the dispersal signal, a clipped bird call that vanished in the wind. All along the street, shuttered windows twitched. 100 silent figures slid through alleys, shoulders burdened with burlap sacks that looked innocuous until you noticed the faint hiss of respiration inside. Thousands of juvenile tillandsia, air plants bred to drink smoke and spit oxygen tenfold. Theo had spent months cross-grafting them with drought-resistant epiphytes until their trichomes shone like tiny silver daggers. Tonight those leaves would drink fire. Vera peeled off to flank the brigade from the east, rifle slung but safety on. Ammunition remained rationed, lethal force reserved for last thresholds. Theo descended through a service hatch and into the tunnels where the city's forgotten circulatory system hummed. The air tasted of metal and mycelium. Anna waited at the junction chamber, sleeves rolled, adjusting valves that would vent greenish vapor upward through sidewalk grates when she gave the word. The vapor was a microbial mist, harmless to lungs, fatal to silicon optics. One breath of it would blind drones for hours. Pressure at 90%, she reported without looking up. Give me a minute more and I can cook their target tracking scopes, too. We may only have 30 seconds, Theo said. Lights already on the outer fence. Anna tilted her goggles back, eyes rimmed with sleepless red. Then let's rewrite physics faster. On the boulevard, Sergeant Borba of the brigade raised a hand and the line halted. 10 soldiers, 2 conscripts, 1 defector pressed into service by threat of sibling execution. Borba's gas mask hid the grin he felt stretching across unshaven cheeks. Soon he would stand where no citizen could deny his dominion. The botanical complex would be scorched into viability for target runs, and Borba, who had grown up kicking coffee plants on a subsistence plot outside Picos, would finally wield enough power to kill anything green without apology. He signaled forward. 2 recruits heaved canisters of Agent P, an unlicensed defoliant reverse-engineered from Vietnam-era archives, onto a pushcart and rolled it toward the gates. A thin chemical mist burped from loose seals and drifted across the pavement like halitosis from a dying god. 50 meters away, just beyond the glow of their torches, a girl stepped into the street. She was no older than 16, barefoot, hair in a single braid. She carried nothing but a cheap tin watering can whose painted roses had chipped away to raw metal. Borba froze, raising a fist, rifles ratcheted upward. "Move aside," he barked, amplifiers in his mask rendering the order mechanical. The girl tilted her head as though parsing a foreign language. Then she did something incomprehensible. She knelt, unscrewed the can's lid, and poured a thread of water onto the fractured asphalt. In that instant, every shadow around her seemed to ripple. Borba's eyes flicked to the rooftops. Too late. From the windows above, sacks split open, releasing a glittering cascade of Talansia that caught torchlight like shrapnel forged of stars. The air plants twirled, hunger-drunk, their scales already siphoning particles from the chemical haze. In seconds, torches guttered as oxygen vanished into a lush maelstrom. Before Borba could shout, vents beneath the street exhaled a jade fog. Drone optics blinked red warnings. Targeting arrays died. Soldiers yanked off malfunctioning goggles only to find the world milked into poisonous blur. Then the ground itself bucked. Lucas had triggered the capillary pumps at full capacity, flooding the dehydrated subsoil with river runoff channeled from 4 kilometers north. The once crumbled ballast swelled, then liquefied, swallowing the cart's wheels. Defoliant drums toppled, splashing amber toxin onto boots whose soles dissolved in seconds, fusing leather to flesh. Screams warred with the hiss of neutralized torch heads. The girl, an orphan courier known to the cell as Beja, stepped backward into a doorway and vanished. Theo surfaced through a maintenance grate, heart hammering. Vera emerged across the avenue and fired 2 warning shots into the air. Pure theater, to chase survivors into retreat. The brigade broke formation, some limping, some crawling, all howling retreat. Talansia clung to them like living confetti, a humiliation they would carry until flame or solvent peeled the leaves away. Rain began just as the last rifle reports faded. Large, warm drops that flattened the chemical puddles into harmless amber islands. Above the boulevard, balconies blossomed with faces. Citizens who had spent 8 years flinching at every noise now leaning forward to witness a miracle the color of chlorophyll. Theo lifted his mask and tasted petrichor. For the first time since the sirens died, the air of Terezina held no aftertaste of surrender. Celebration was not an instinct they remembered well. Yet that night the tunnels thrummed with a cautious joy. Bia strummed a reclaimed cavaquinho whose missing strings she'd replaced with copper wire. Anna improvised percussion on empty gel canisters. Someone uncorked a bottle of pre-war cachaca saved for a funeral that never happened and passed it around, lips brushing glass like pilgrims at a relic. Theo sat apart, back against a root that had punched clean through concrete. He rolled Lucinda's seed between thumb and forefinger. 8 years in a coat pocket, and it still gleamed translucent amber, as though lit from within by miniature sunrise. He felt the weight of all the days he'd postponed planting it, as if fearing the story might demand more of him than he could surrender. Now, though, he recognized another postponement was impossible. The garden was no longer a sanctuary. It had become a front line, and front lines devoured hesitation. He found Anna calibrating algae flow meters. "I need a growth chamber," he told her, holding out the seed. She studied it under lamplight, brows knitting. "Whatever it is, it's alive. You can hear the embryo rattling." "What's special?" "It remembers an older climate," he said, surprising himself with certainty. "We'll need that memory soon." Anna didn't ask for explanation. She simply cleared a shelf in her lab alcove, adjusted humidity to 93%, and lined the seed on a bed of crushed charcoal and loam. "Speak to it," she advised, half smiling. "You're fluent in whatever language they use." Theo closed the cabinet, palm lingering on the warm plexiglass. He swallowed a pulse of dread. Stories, once told, obey their own momentum. Momentum arrived the next morning in the form of a stranger on a white flag. He walked alone down the boulevard, unarmed, palms raised. His uniform looked brigade but lacked any insignia. His boots were polished, impossible luxury. At the conservatory gates he stopped, waiting. Theo, Vera, and Bia confronted him, rifles leveled. Beyond the stranger's shoulders, citizens peered through cracked shutters, holding collective breath. "I am Colonel Iago Galdino," he announced. His voice carried the cracked smoothness of someone accustomed to issuing death preceded by courtesy. "I speak not for the brigade but for the Provisionary Allied Command of Terezina." He bowed, a gesture that looked ceremonial until one noticed the joints remained ready to spring. "Never heard of it," Vera said. Galdino smiled with a surgeon's precision. You will. May we talk somewhere tasteful? These theatrics invite intervention. Theo's gaze swept the rooftops. No snipers yet. Speak here, he said. Very well. Galdino clasped his hands behind his back. We admire your ingenuity. Truly, you have demonstrated strategic mastery over terrain, morale, and narrative. But be realistic. Botanical theatrics cannot withstand the arsenal moving south from Fortaleza. Mechanized infantry, cluster thermobarics, electromagnetic impulse nodes calibrated to erase power grids. They will arrive in 9 days. Bia exhaled a tremor of laughter. You expect us to surrender because you can pronounce long words? Expect? No. Galdino inclined his head. I offer a treaty. Vacate the garden. The command will preserve a segment as historical monument. In exchange, your leadership receives safe passage to neutral territory. Theo felt a hush ripple through onlookers. Hope of amnesty was a drug, and fear always wanted to chase it. He pictured the seedlings curling under ultraviolet-rich glass, the tunnels breathing microclimates, the orphan courier cleaning chemical burns off her feet after last night's victory. Leave Now and the brigade, or whatever shiny rebrand it wore, would pave paradise into a proving ground, erect statues glorifying its own restraint. Nature doesn't sign treaties, Theo said. It does when starved of water, Galdino replied. We control the river sluice gates. Within 3 days your aquifer will whimper. Within 5, your seedlings will be dust. Heroes, Colonel Costa. He used Theo's rank without permission, twisting the title like a knife. Are glorious only while alive. Plants die quietly. He produced a paper map, unfolded it, and pinned it with his boot. Red circles sprawled across neighborhoods, projected blast radii. He stepped back, palms open, as though the threat were a benign object he regretted revealing. Theo recognized the cartography of genocide. He also recognized something else, the Colonel's shadow. The angle of the sun placed it squarely over a fissure Lucas had charted 2 months earlier, a dormant sinkhole awaiting only vibration. Theo met Galdino's gaze. My answer is no. The Colonel sighed, folding the map. Conviction makes beautiful tombstones. He turned, walking the way he'd come. Theo waited, pulse drumming. At the boulevard's midpoint, Vera depressed a remote detonator. The fissure convulsed. Earth swallowed shadow. Dust geysered upward, then settled. Galdino was gone. Silence held for 5 breaths. Citizens emerged, stunned. Theo felt no triumph, only inevitability. Men like Galdino regrew like ragweed from seed neither fire nor flood can silence. He addressed the crowd. They'll cut the river. We must grow water. Nobody laughed at the paradox. Instead, Anna stepped forward. We can biodistill atmospheric moisture if we build enough condensers. Vera nodded. We have mirrors, scrap aluminum, tubing. We can break every rooftop apart if needed. Beja the courier limped out of the shadows. And people, she added, more than you think. Faces lifted, meeting the light instead of hiding from it. They began that afternoon, ringing rooftops with arrays of salvaged mirrors angled toward vats coated in cooling gel, forcing vapor to bead on glass slides that dripped into concealed cisterns. Children in slum apartments volunteered cartons of cracked picture frames. Pensioners donated heirloom spoons that could be hammered into reflective petals. The city itself became a machine for wringing sky into drink. Meanwhile, Theo descended with Lucas to the aquifer's brittle cap. Together they drilled microvents with surgical steadiness, injecting spores of Ceroporia fibrosa, a fungus engineered decades earlier to weave silica threads through collapsing sandstone, essentially knitting rock. The spores would chew into faults, excreting latticework that both stored moisture and channeled it upward through capillary action. If it worked, Terezinha's subsoil would throb like 1,000 hidden hearts. But science alone could not outpace an armored column. Opposition required sabotage. Vera led night teams along rail lines, slathering rails with resin harvested from Theo's first seedling wave, a resin whose expansion under heat displaced steel ties and derailed convoys. Bia recorded ghost broadcasts that lured brigade supply drones into nets woven from carbon filament creepers. Nilo and other street children, too nimble for patrol detection, replaced propaganda posters with hand-drawn broadsides. Vines strangling tanks, sunflowers ricocheting bullets. Even so, reports filtered in. The Fortaleza column advanced 40 kilometers a day. 9 days shrank to 5, then 3. Thermobaric warheads were seen loaded onto flatbeds. EMP nodes crackled on test runs, frying car batteries as far as Sobral. The enemy meant to cauterize resistance in a single superheated breath. On the second dawn of countdown, Anna burst into Theo's work bay, wild-eyed. "It's germinating." He followed her to the growth chamber. Lucinda's amber seed had split along a seam fine as eyelash, revealing a sprout luminescent as moonwater. Cotyledons unfurled with indecent speed, exuding a faint electric hum. Theo inhaled a scent he couldn't place. Half sandalwood, half rainfall on copper. Anna ran a spectrometer. Chlorophyll analog off the charts. It's photosynthesizing infrared. Theo's chest flooded with awe. It can eat heat. Anna's gaze snapped to his. "Theo, if we could scale this..." Those thermobarics rely on rapid expansion of atmospheric oxygen. A canopy of these could starve detonation. Or drink the fire afterward. He felt conviction calcify in his bones. "We plant it tonight." Planting required holy theater. At midnight, the city gathered in the conservatory ruins, lanterns shielded behind layered glass. Theo carried the seedling nested in his palms, roots wrapped around a globe of mycelial gel that pulsed like a heartbeat. Bia hummed a low drone. Vera kept watch, rifle balanced but silent. They chose the conservatory's central nexus, where once an ancient paurosa had towered before flames reduced it to aromatic ash. Theo knelt, brushing aside debris until soil showed. He placed the seedling. It glowed, casting glyphs of green light across faces ringed in circumspection. He whispered the only benediction he knew. "Write something with this." As the roots met earth, a ripple of light raced along the garden beds, igniting leaves with silver veins. The conservatory breathed, an audible exhalation, and vines shot upward, threading broken dome struts, knitting glass fragments into lattices that refracted moonlight into fractal gardens on every wall. People gasped. Some wept. Theo watched veins extend past the conservatory walls, roots probing fissures, stems coiling lampposts like curious serpents. The plant was rewriting architecture, turning ruin into trellis. Anna glanced at her sensor, voice trembling. "It's ramping metabolism with no plateau in sight. We've created a thermal sink." Vera nodded toward the north. Low on the horizon, a dull orange glow marked the advancing column. Even at this distance, the sky tasted metallic. Theo rose. "Then let's feed it." The final day bloomed sulfur yellow with dust blown ahead of armored treads. Citizens moved with fierce serenity, adjusting mirror angles, unspooling fungal fiber to the last centimeter. Children perched on balconies scattering crimson root seeds across entryways. An honor now, a badge of resistance. Every rooftop bristled with condensers. Every alley murmured with water trickling into improvised aqueducts. Shortly after noon, horizon lines shimmered with heat mirages resolved into glittering armor plates and missile racks. At their center lumbered 2 thermobaric carrier trucks, each warhead stubby as a whale, nose cones bearing hazard runes that looked like laughing skulls. A loudspeaker boomed. "Evacuate the quarter immediately. Final notice." Nobody moved. The carriers halted 500 meters from the conservatory. Engineers unfolded launch arms, calibrating angles. Theo stood atop the dome's skeletal apex, wind tugging his coat. Around him the new vine, already christened Lucinda by unanimous murmuring, had woven itself into a living spire, leaves trembling with contained appetite. Distance. Vera cummed from a sniper perch. 480 and closing, Theo replied. "Give the word." He waited until the launch arms locked. Flame tongues burst under warheads, propellant shoving steel cylinders skyward. Twin projectiles roared overhead, aiming to suck lungs from bodies, shatter ears, set stone ablaze with airborne fuel. Theo whispered, "Now." From the spire's apex splintered a net of bioluminescent tendrils, too fast to follow, a mesh of living filaments arching upward. They met the rising warheads like a pupil swallowing light. Impact made no sound, sound requires pressure difference, and Lucinda drank pressure like vintage wine. The warheads vanished into a cocoon of green translucency. Inside, incendiary gel tried to burn. The vine siphoned heat, exhaling steam scented with rain. When the cocoon split and fell in petals, nothing remained but two dull shells, smothered. The column faltered. Confusion rippled. Radios spat chaos. Then the vine pressed its attack. Tendrils wove into caterpillar treads, clamped drive wheels, ruptured hydraulics. Crimson root seeds exploded into fractal barbs, tangling ankles. Lucinda's main stalk thickened, heaving through cracked pavement, lifting a tank onto its flank like a cardboard toy. Citizens emerged from hiding, armed not with rifles but lengths of rebar and buckets of nutrient gel they flung onto armored surfaces. The gel foamed, feeding vine growth, which drilled through air intakes, clogged exhausts, peeled steel like fruit. Theo felt the city awaken. Concrete arches sprouted moss. Bullet holes birthed fern fronds. Gutters spilled blossoms. Soldiers, men and women indoctrinated to fear nothing but orders, threw weapons, fled, or simply stared as the urban world they meant to enslave devoured their certainties one leaf at a time. Colonel Galdino did not reappear. Some said they heard metal groaning beneath the boulevard where sinkholes whispered. Others claimed a vine shaped like a noose dangled from a lamppost years rusted. War breeds stories faster than statistics. By dusk, engines lay silent. Fires extinguished themselves. Smoke filleted into ribbons by Tillandsia hungry for carbon. Rain arrived, soft, continuous, the kind that settles arguments. It filled cisterns, slid down fungal channels, seeped into underground reservoirs where Cereporia webs glowed pale against darkness. Theo stood at the conservatory threshold, watching children chase luminescent leaves that drifted like fireflies. Vera joined him, rifle slack at her side. "Is it over?" she asked. "For today," he said. "Tomorrow the world wakes up and wonders how Teresina rewrote the rules." She nudged him, half smiling. "Then we'll draft a syllabus." Anna approached with a sensor pad. "You should see these numbers." Lucinda's pulling infrared from 2 kilometers radius. She's knitting the microclimate back together. "Give her a month and we'll have dew every dawn." Theo looked at the vine, its tallest frond brushing cloud-tattered sky, and felt a hush inside him like answered prayer. Somewhere beneath his thoughts he heard Dona Lucinda's voice. "Every plant tells a story. Some grow roots into tomorrow." He thought of the wider war beyond Teresina, continents scorched by leaders who never learned to kneel in soil. He thought of seeds waiting in vaults and pockets and memories. The city was a beginning, not an epilogue. Night settled. Stars emerged, refracted through newly mended glass, each one mirrored in droplets quivering on leaves. Theo whispered to the vine, to the city, to anyone listening, "We're not done." The dawn after the vine storm, Teresina smelled the way legends do when they're still warm. Sap and ozone, rust and wet limestone, the faint electric tang of inventions nobody had imagined yesterday. Every gutter burbled, every drainpipe dripped, the city's heartbeat had grown audible, a pulse hidden for years beneath shellfire now hammering in open air. People woke to find moss where bullet holes had been, gutters braided with tillandsia like hastily sown laurels, and over everything, Lucinda's green crown swaying as though conducting an orchestra of clouds. Yet victories attract cartographers of ruin. 200 kilometers north, in a camouflaged command bunker inherited from an oil consortium, General Archer Modula of the Western Coalition watched satellite feeds flicker into static. Teresina's thermobaric nullification had stunned every analyst. An urban pocket, written off as collateral, had swallowed $1 million strike and spit out bouquets. Matilla's brief was surgical, prevent replication of that miracle anywhere the coalition sought leverage. He summoned Operative 8, a woman whose real name had been surrendered to encryption the day she volunteered to become a myth. Her orders: identify the plant, weaponize its genome, then erase the source. Operative 8 slid on her respirator, voice flat. "How long until they push the ceasefire referendum?" Matilla's jaw clenched. 48 hours. If Teresina becomes proof of concept, parliaments will fold. Bring me something I can burn into their doubts before the vote rings in their ears. Theo did not know satellites were dying above him, only that the sky seemed cleaner, stars sharper, the Milky Way like spilled salt across velvet. He sat atop an old traffic camera pole that Lucinda had sheathed in bark-textured vines until it resembled a palm tree too stubborn to check its own birth certificate. Below, Beja and Nilo painted more broadsides, children in paper hats watering skyscrapers, roots punching through drone hulls like divine handwriting. Anna joined him, carrying a handheld spectroscope humming like a baby dragon. Lucinda's still escalating. She's storing more jowls than a solar farm and radiating them at wavelengths plants aren't supposed to see. She aimed the meter upward. The canopy's creating a micro-ionosphere. Radio dead zones for hostile drones, free bandwidth for us. Theo breathed the night in. So she's a shield and a megaphone. And maybe a seed factory. Anna gestured to a pod swelling along the main stalk, half a meter long, shimmering silver. It matured in 30 hours. If it drops before we sequence her genome, we'll have hundreds of daughter plants evolving in the wild. Good, Theo said, soft and fierce. He felt gravity tilt, a future was tugging at his collar. Let the world inherit them before more generals inherit the world. The general's envoy arrived by humanitarian convoy at noon, 6 trucks painted white, engines stuttering the way guilt stutters behind a priest's smile. They carried crates marked medical aid, their letters stenciled in 17 languages for television cameras that would never come. Vera inspected the manifests, gauze, antibiotics, iodized salt, water purification tablets, and nodded them through. People lined up to receive vials and bandages. The convoy crawled forward like a serpent shedding generosity from rented skins. Inside the 3rd truck, Operative 8 crouched behind a bulkhead false wall. She watched through a fiber optic slit as Lucinda's tendrils braided overhead. A tremor of awe flickered across her training, but always a reagent she had learned to precipitate and discard. She inhaled, adjusting the nanite canister strapped beneath her ribs, 100 milliliters of programmable dust designed to mimic fungal spores, to hijack cell walls, rewrite DNA, and then degrade before any forensic daylight could catch them. When the truck halted at the central plaza, she slid from her hiding hollow, blending among volunteers offloading supplies. Her cover, Dr. Saskia Havel, epidemiologist. Her buffer, inoculation records forged to survive any retinal suspicion. She smiled when Bia offered her water. She mirrored gratitude when Beja handed her a strip of vine bark as good luck charm. She memorized the rhythm of their voices, inserting them into the ledger of things she might need to betray. Night bunched behind clouds by the time Operative 8 found her opening. Anna had invited medical volunteers into the algae labs for orientation. Under humming lamps, flasks glowed turquoise, casting marine patterns across everyone's faces. Theo stood at the back, arms folded, half listening, half scanning for anything out of tune. There's talk of scurvy upticks in the South Quarter, Anna explained, handing out files. These algae strains deliver vitamin C in microdoses. Mix with rooftop cistern water at 1 drop per liter. Operative 8 lifted a file, studying the suspension. Elegant, she said. Reminds me of an Antarctic culture we use to feed miners. Can they scale? With sunlight and love, anything scales, Anna answered, smiling the smile of someone who had built cathedrals under artillery. Come tour the condenser decks after shift, we could use Antarctic hacks. Operative 8 nodded. Would be honored. Theo watched the newcomer's fingers, steady, callus pattern more surgical than laborer. Her accent wavered between 2 continents when she said honored. He filed the data where suspicion grows moss but not yet teeth. Midnight, the city slept in increments of trust. Operative 8 unwound ventilation grate screws outside the main sprout chamber. Inside, humidity glistened on Lucinda's towering anatomy, silver pods quivered on stems fattening by the minute. The operative drew the nanite canister, adjusted the dispersal valve to 10-micron aerosol. She whispered the unlock code, syllables of a dead tongue taught to field agents to slice conscience from obedience, and prepared to flood the chamber. She never heard Theo approach. He had followed the smell, vine sap disturbed by unloved hands, a note so faint only someone who slept beside plants could taste it. He glimpsed the silver cylinder in her palm, felt dread crystallize. Turn around. Operative 8 pivoted slowly, raising empty palms. The canister dangled from her left wrist by a loop. Misunderstanding, she offered, voice calm. Theo leveled his flashlight. Light scalded her eyes, she didn't flinch. State your name. Saskia Havel, she said. Wrong. Theo stepped forward. Your boots are polymer notched to mute heartbeat vibrations against ground radar, military issue. Your respirator's filter is coded for nanite containment, not pathogen. You're here to kill something. Operative 8 sighed. I'm here to trade one death for many avoided. The usual arithmetic. Theo reached for his comm. She reacted. A thumb flicked. The canister hissed, valve half open. He lunged, knocking it aside. Vapor plumed, but the displacement sucked it out the open grate before contacting any plant tissue. Operative 8 ducked, sweeping his legs, a motion fluid as grammar. He fell, shoulder slamming loam. She sprinted toward exit. Alarms triggered. Anna's motion sensors pinged abnormalities in airflow. Metal shutters slammed over ducts. Operative 8 diverted, climbing a lattice of vines toward a skylight. Lucinda reacted, the vines reshaped, closing, attempting to cradle the intruder rather than release. She drew a ceramic blade, slashing green ropes that bled sap luminous white. Theo chased up a steel support. Stop. She's sensing you as pathogen. If you force a response, you'll trigger her defense chemistry. Operative 8 kicked off a stem, flipped through the mending skylight aperture, landing on the dome rim outside. Wind howled. She sprinted along glass shards fused by Lucinda's secret sugars, heading for a communications mast where a Euro paraglider waited like a folded vulture. Below, Vera and Bea barreled through service stairs. Spotlights roved. Sirens bit the dark. Theo popped through the skylight. The dome's curvature offered one path. He ran, boots skidding on dew, heart pounding with the sudden knowledge that every step decided if history went feral or fertile. Operative 8 reached the mast, clipped harness to the glider. Listen, Theo called over the wind. You saw what we built. We can share it, offer seed, not threat. Operative 8 locked goggles. Miracles are political if only one city holds them. She yanked the release. The glider caught a gust, canopy inflating translucent as dragonfly wings. She leapt. Theo dove catching a riser line. The glider wobbled, dragging them both into open air. They pendulumed above rooftops, Lucinda's spire receding. Theo's grip burned. Operative 8 reached for her blade to sever the line. He wrapped it around his forearm, shouting, "Cut me and you lose your data." She paused, eyes narrowed. Explain. You need Lucinda's genome, yes? I memorized the primer sequences during sequencing. Kill me, you'll retrieve nothing before the referendum. She spat a gusty laugh. You won't betray your city. I'll share it freely, he said, lungs shredding on cold air. But it must stay free. Public domain instantly everywhere. No lab lockbox, no weapon patents. Otherwise the miracle dies in cages and we go back to bombs. He saw the city lights kaleidoscope beneath them, a constellation redrawing itself every second. I will give you the code. On one condition, broadcast it unencrypted the moment we land. A silence stretched, thin as the wing fabric. Operative 8 adjusted her grip on the control toggle, testing choices. Ground rushed closer, they would clear the perimeter in 20 seconds. Sirens trailed them and voices against the wind. I believe you, she said. Then she cut her own harness line, flipping backward into freefall. Theo stared. She'd sacrificed her certainty for escape velocity. He clung to the remnant glider, wrestled skewed lift, found course balance. Below, Operative 8 deployed a compact chute, drifting toward the riverbank where a stealth skimmer waited. Theo cursed. He couldn't chase and save the plant. He banked the glider back toward the dome, praying crosswind held. Operative 8 landed beside the skimmer. She yanked open the storage hatch for a secondary nanite canister backup plan, release at the river, let current carry death into the city's route intake. She hesitated. The negotiation still rang in her blood, a genome for the commons. Could an open miracle destabilize wars more elegantly than a silenced one? Her training screamed no, her humanity whispered maybe. Thunder growled. She looked upriver, storm front flashing strobe over jungle silhouettes. If she deployed now, rain would dilute payload, analysis impossible. She keyed her comm, objective compromised. Returning with partial intel. Request extraction corridor. Static answered, Lucinda's ionosphere jamming coalition signals. The miracle had already begun to share itself. Operative 8 glanced at the canister, then at the river, then back toward the vine-lit city whose glow pulsed like a newborn star. She thought of Beija's good luck bark, still in her pocket. She thought of Theo's offer, a world where secrets were gardens instead of fortresses. She dropped the canister into the skimmer's locker, slammed it shut, and kicked the craft's engine to life, pointed south, away from coalition lines, toward borderless territory. The river accepted her wake without judgment. Theo crashed into the dome's upper canopy. Lucinda caught him, vines cushioning impact, lowering him to soil like a scolded kitten. He limped into the sprout chamber where Anna, Vera, and a half-dozen volunteers isolated the partial nanite cloud in vacuum hoods. Sensors glowed amber. Minimal exposure, Anna reported. No cell invasion. We'll fold in silver ions to denature the rest. Theo exhaled. Operative escaped, but she left with nothing except conversation. That may be everything, Vera said. Radio intercepts show coalition satellites dropping offline around our coordinates. Lucinda's ion canopy is scrambling military comms worldwide. Via Burston, waving a printout. Signal spikes, someone outside our net is broadcasting low-band genomic strings too compressed to open yet, but repeating globally. Theo slumped, heart-lurching. Operative 8 had published the code. Anna raised eyebrows. If that's Lucinda's sequence, every lab on Earth just got keys to the Green Kingdom. Keys only matter to those willing to open doors, Theo said. He imagined scientists in bunkers scanning data, corporate execs drafting patent claims, insurgents debating whether vines made better barricades than bullets. The future had scattered like seeds on a gale, no gatekeeper could recall them. The referendum convened 46 hours later in a virtual assembly attended by diplomats huddled in candlelit embassies, their servers fried by geomagnetic anomalies born from Lucinda's sky halo. Across flickering screens, delegates reviewed footage of vines smothering thermobarics, of children drinking condenser water, of a genome scroll cycling across ticker lines. The vote to suspend hostilities passed 119 to 14. Treaties demanded verification. Envoys visit Terezina to observe the plant phenomenon. The war paused, not from exhaustion of weapons, but from the revelation that weapons might soon be as obsolete as flint. Peace, however provisional, revealed old fractures inside the city. Water cooperatives argued with mirror guilds over due-share quotas. Street artists wanted less military patrol, patrols felt naked without rifles. Theo chaired assemblies in the conservatory-turned-forum, reminding everyone the vine did not obey speeches, it measured faith in mulch, not microphones. Lucinda herself continued to astonish. Pods burst nightly, scattering downy seeds that drifted on thermals, seeking buildings as eagerly as soil. Where they landed, they rooted in cracks, knitting mortar, exhaling microclimates that coaxed dormant seeds of mundane species to germinate. Walls sprouted cilantro, gutters dangled strawberries. Urban design surrendered to horticultural improvisation. Anna and Lucas mapped growth patterns, identifying a hidden geometry, a logarithmic spiral radiating from the original seed, its arms aligning with ancient ley lines rumored by pre-colonial shamans. Whether myth or math, Lucinda respected cartographies lost to asphalt. Theo listened to the city at night and felt those lines humming under his feet. 6 weeks after the failed Nanite strike, the first verification envoy landed, an amphibious tilt rotor emblazoned with shattered globe insignia of the United Armistice Secretariat. Among them, agronomists, climate archivists, a neurobotanist whose left eye was a camera socket. They disembarked into humidity that smelled of overripe promise. Theo greeted them barefoot, dirt under nails. Protocols demanded suits, but he had decided to resemble the ground more than the government. He guided them through the conservatory, now bursting with fruit so vivid it looked rendered. Children darted between trunks rewired with conductive lianas powering rooftop lanterns. The neurobotanist, Dr. Helena Paz, touched a vine node and gasped. This is no mere plant. It's distributing signal molecules that mimic neurotransmitters, serotonin analogs in trace aerosol. The whole city's breathing subtle anti-depression. Explains why arguments end faster lately, Theo said. Paz knelt, placing neuroreceptive patches on bark. We may be inside a living nervous system. Theo watched Lucinda's leaves rustle. He wondered if the vine felt pride or curiosity or simply the throbbing imperative to grow. He remembered Dona Lucinda's maxim, stories choose their storytellers. Perhaps the plant had chosen a city with enough fractures to let light in. That night, envoys dined on rooftop terraces while Tillandsia chandeliers glinted. Discussions meandered from reparations to open-source seed banks to legal personhood for superplants. Paz addressed Theo privately. If the genome remains open, militaries will still chase weaponization. We need governance. Governance begins with guardianship, Theo said. We're forming a council of custodians, scientists, farmers, poets, anyone Lucinda trusts. Not to own her, but to listen. Paz smiled, half skeptical, half reverent. I'd like a chair at that table. Across the river, in a farmhouse that had survived bombing because nobody cared to waste a missile on nostalgia, Operative 8 sat before a rust-patched radio transceiver. She had been transmitting updates to no one, coalition channels dead, extraction orders silent. She clipped wires, retuned frequencies, caught fragments of newscasts, ceasefire, open genome, economic realignment. She heard her own defection rebranded as heroic whistleblow. She laughed, a sound foreign on her tongue. She opened a lockbox, withdrew the last nanite canister. A relic now soared in a world courting plowshares. She considered shipping it to Terrazina as proof of good faith. But good faith should travel light. Instead, she carried it outside, unscrewed the cap, and poured the nanites onto soil saturated by upstream condensers. A breeze lifted the dust, dispersing threat into irrelevance. She crushed the empty cylinder under her boot and watched ants investigate. Perhaps they would incorporate the metal's memory into their architecture, building resilient corridors. Recycling treachery into shelter felt appropriate. She set off on foot toward the distant glow of vine-lit sky, a pilgrim to the city she had tried to extinguish. Weeks spiraled into cockeyed spring. Lucinda's seeds germinated across the continent, drifting on trade winds, hitching rides in diplomat coat cuffs. Reports surfaced of vines cracking prison walls in Recife, cooling smog belts over Bogotá, weaving refugee tents into weatherproof domes outside Caracas. Governments debated containment. Citizens staged green blockades, chanting route louder than sirens in dozens of languages. Theo traveled with a small delegation along railway segments the vine had rendered impassable to tanks but pleasant to bicycles. At each stop he taught workshops, how to graft Lucinda's seedlings onto native flora without ecological domination, how to translate her humidity codes into irrigation patterns, how to listen. He carried a pendant grown from the original seed's husk, a reminder that even miracles leave shells. Nilo insisted on joining, now 15 and brimful of swagger. He documented everything with a wind-up camera, no batteries required, film donated by a photojournalist who said memory should be tangible. Beja focused on teaching children to make paper embedded with moss spores. When the paper composted, letters sprouted tiny poems. Anna remained in Terrazina, overseeing a new research cooperative integrating Lucinda's infrared photosynthesis with rooftop algae panels. She planned to reverse desertification zones by exporting condensed dew matrices. Some called it sky farming. She preferred the phrase reclaiming evaporation. Vera chaired the Custodians' Council, negotiating with former brigade cells who wanted amnesty in exchange for labor, building aqueducts of fungal mycelium, mending roads with root-reinforced asphalt. She made them plant trees for every bullet once fired. She said redemption needed measurable anchors. But stories, like climates, carry tipping points. And somewhere in the rubble of Brasilia, a think tank funded by oligarch remnants drafted a report, Biohegemony and the Threat of Green Terror. Its thesis, unchecked spread of Lucinda-class organisms could cripple industry, dissolve borders, empower insurgencies. Leaked excerpts reached Terrazina, sparking debate. Were they guardians or vectors of contagion? Could hope mutate into hubris? Theo returned home to find graffiti on a viaduct, Lucinda or nothing. Absolutism, even in green, chilled him. He addressed a square of cheering youth. Roots can split stone, but they cannot replace the stone's memory. We need both. Some listened, some scowled. Revolutions breed impatience faster than fruit. Anna pulled him aside after the speech, face drawn. Satellite data shows Lucinda's ion canopy nudging Earth's electromagnetic balance. Auroras blooming over equator latitudes, migratory birds veering. She may be scaling beyond intention. Theo stared at the vine spire, now brushing tropospheric winds, leaves flickering with St. Elmo's fire. What are you saying? That miracles have maintenance fees. We need a dial, not just an engine. Theo felt wind whipseed down across his cheeks like snow. Lucinda had given them a tool, now tool threatened to become geography. He recalled Dona Lucinda's last lesson he'd been too young to parse. Healing isn't endless growth, it's balance regained. That night, Lucinda bloomed for the first time. Massive petals unfurled, each glowing from within, painting the city neon jade. Scent flooded streets, a compound both sweet and flinty, promising adventure. People poured from houses, staring upward as fireflies orbited the bloom like devout satellites. In the plaza, Theo pressed his hand to the trunk. He felt pulses not just upward but inward, as if roots had found something buried and were conferring truths. He remembered the sinkholes, the aquifer, the fungal webs, a labyrinth of new organs beneath their feet. The plant wasn't merely using the city, it was integrating, rewriting urban tissue into biome, weaving human design into primordial script. Operative 8 arrived, footsteps muffled by moss. She stood beside him without words. In her eyes he saw neither regret nor mission, only curiosity. We may have to prune a god, she said gently. Theo nodded, tears he hadn't known were cued rising. Or learn to grow beside one without drowning in shade. While petals glowed, Anna convened emergency council. Scientists argued thresholds, poets accused them of fear, farmers asked about crop pollinators confused by the bloom's electromagnetic hum. Vera proposed partial canopy damping, install mirrors to reflect excess charge skyward. Bia suggested teaching vine to fold leaves at solar noon, like giant prayer hands giving the sun back to other plants. Arguments lasted until dawn. No consensus, only the shared realization that stewardship was harder than rebellion. Theo climbed Lucinda's trunk at sunrise, higher than safety allowed. Above smog ghosts, he watched the horizon smoothing, smokestacks silent because factories hadn't resumed after the truce. He saw valleys where new vines glimmered, threads across continents. He whispered, "Tell us how to help you help us." The vine's leaves shimmered, catching a breeze that carried scents from forests he'd never walked. He understood no literal voice would reply, yet he sensed invitation, co-evolve or perish estranged. Cities had always been organisms, now they had to confess it. He climbed down, muscles trembling, purpose crystallizing like dew. They would craft symbiosis protocols, guidelines for growth curves, electromagnetic thresholds, pollinator corridors. They would teach other cities to adopt rather than exploit. They would prune, graft, listen. And they would face new adversaries, fear merchants, resource barons, ideologues worshipping green or damning it. But they would face them with seeds, data, and the stubborn capacity for awe. Theo gathered counsel in the conservatory, sunlight cross-hatching through vines. He placed on the table a blank charter. "Lucinda gave us a beginning," he said. "Now let's grow a covenant." Pens scratched. Voices rose, overlapped, harmonized, argued. Outside, petals slowly folded, dawn soaking them gold. In the hush that followed the first sentence agreed upon, Theo heard the city's pulse align with his own. The covenant's first clause, "No miracle shall belong to one." The covenant was a sapling of sentences when the first backlash struck. A month after Lucinda's night bloom, the oligarchic compact convened its own summit deep in the Patagonian Cordillera. Frozen peaks guarded a bunker where ex-generals and ex-shareholders huddled around a single burning question: how do you short-sell a planet that refuses to die? Their answer was Project Wraith, a mosaic of orbital mirrors designed to starve Lucinda's children of sunlight and bounce lethal intensities onto any canopy large enough to interfere with satellites. Not a weapon, they insisted, just preventive shading. The launch manifests were buried in WeatherSat budgets. The mirror tiles went up like silver confetti, invisible to citizens who had started measuring time by sea fall instead of fiscal quarters. Terrazina learned of the array only when dawn arrived an hour late and crooked. Shadows no longer behaved, mornings now contained a bruised dusk in their marrow. Roof condensers produced half their due, Tillandsia chandeliers dimmed. And high above, a faint lattice glimmered, sunlight sliced into disciplined obedience. The call for rooted light. Anna ran the numbers first, voice tight over the conservatory intercom. 15% solar attenuation citywide, trending to 23. Lucinda can compensate for a while, but her distal offspring will stall. We're watching a continental throttle. Theo pressed his palms to the bark floor where vine capillaries glowed like muted starlight. "Then we uncage our own dawn," he said. The Custodians' Council split into task forces. Spectrum, Vera's unit to hijack old radio telescopes and beam grow light frequencies back earthward. Flux, Anna and Dr. Helena paused to teach Lucinda's neuromesh how to photosynthesize moonlight and auroral spillover. Sporeprint, Operative 8, no longer a code name but a badge reclaimed, to infiltrate the compact's supply chains and rewrite launch permissions at the ASI ground station in Namibia. Beja and Nilo, now voices of a swelling green youth congress, took on morale, murals on every mirror-shaded block, QR lessons in sidewalk moss about resiliency and the math of chlorophyll. Lucinda herself responded in ways no committee predicted. Beneath Terrazina, her route web thickened, wrapping abandoned metro rails in lignin cables that carried faint bioluminescent pulses east, signaling, Anna theorized, to her distant clones for coordinated resource sharing. Hives of networked fungi began extruding delicate silica threads skyward, condensing microfog even under distorted dawns. The city, starved of one form of light, started brewing another. Spectrum's gamble. High in the Pedra de Canoa hills, Vera's crew scavenged a derelict radio array once used to listen for asteroid chatter. Panels were cracked, servo gears fused with rust. Yet the dish skeletons still understood the arc of heaven. They bolted biolamps, grow bulbs hacked from hospital phototherapy rigs, into the feed horns and fed them current siphoned from Lucinda's piezoelectric vines. On the first test night, they pointed the dishes straight into the mirror lattice with wattage that would have powered a suburb. Pillars of magenta stabbed the troposphere, ricocheted off silver tiles, and showered the city in a surreal dawn long before sunrise. Residents woke to honeysuckle blooming at 3 a.m., street cats blinking neon green after images from their retinas. The compact's telemetry flagged the anomaly as non-ballistic albedo fluctuation sufficiently obscure to delay retaliation. Vera logged the delay as a victory. Time is a nutrient. Flux and the science of shades. Dr. Paz's EEG patches had already shown that Lucinda's neuromesh fired spike bursts in response to starlight as weak as 20 millilux. So Anna proposed a bargain: if the vine could stretch its spectral appetite into the near UV and radio bands, the mirror shield would matter less. They inoculated test branches with luminous diatoms harvested from deep-sea vents, the kind that dined on blue frequencies alone. The grafts took, leaves freckled with tiny teal constellations that hummed in the dark, absorbing what the mirrors could not steal. Within days the main spire glimmered like a glacier of biopixels, photosynthate output ticked upward even under twin dusk. Lucinda is teaching herself to eat absence, Anna whispered, half fearful of the precedent. Sporeprint's long shadow. Operative 8 re-entered espionage with the unnerving calm of a surgeon returning to her first discipline. False paperwork named her logistics auditor for Orbital Climatology Solutions, LLC, a single seed of Lucinda woven into her jacket lining pulsed faint guidance. In Windhoek she located the mirror tile depot, barrels of polished mylar petals awaiting final boost. She did not sabotage the payloads. Instead, she reprogrammed their orientation firmware, a silent contraband line of code that would tilt each new tile 15 degrees off the chosen coordinate grid, just enough to fracture the lattice's coherence, to let ragged shafts of morning leak through like prison breaks at the speed of light. She escaped across Kalahari dust on a freight rhino truck powered by algae nitrates, her confession packet already en route to international press. Transparency, she had come to believe, is the only camouflage that survives first contact with sunlight. The mirror war. The compact struck back on the ground. 3 helicopter teams stormed the radio dish ridge, rotors threshing Tillandsia from the air. But Lucinda's capillaries had rewired the dish pylons when gunfire shattered a power spine, stored charge arced skyward, ionizing the rotor wash into crackling halos. Electrons leapt like predatory ivy, frying avionics. The helicopters toppled, crashing into vines that flexed and folded, cushioning wrecks rather than gloating in flame. Survivors stumbled out, expecting execution. Instead, children offered them water infused with mint grown on gutter gardens. That mercy outshone any rebuttal the compact had scripted. Viral footage of soldiers cradled by leaves, sipping dew from chipped cups, erased sympathy for the Mirror Project across neutral capitals. Funding evaporated in a fortnight. By equinox, only a ragtag scatter of mirrors remained, and Lucinda's spectral diet had diversified enough to ignore them. Balance or bardo? Victory tasted subtler this time. Gardens flowered in window ledges once shielded. Rainfall pattered regular again. Yet Theo felt unease coil whenever he touched the trunk. Growth metrics plateaued? No, the graph soared. Root pressure was beginning to crack sewage mains. Tilapia breeding ponds downstream grew hypoxic under runaway duckweed seeded by Lucinda's micronutrients. In the council chamber, he laid out the crisis. Miracles scale by appetite, not ethics. A line exists between Guardian Canopy and Green Empire. We are approaching it. Debate rekindled, hotter than under siege. The Green youth wanted expansion, let vines retake deserts, smother smokestacks. Engineers demanded breather corridors for legacy infrastructure. Farmers worried pollinators were imprinting solely on Lucinda's perfume, abandoning traditional crops. Operative 8 proposed a compromise: teach reciprocal dormancy. Trees in boreal winters slow to a whisper, cicadas wait 17 years. Could Lucinda learn seasonal humility? Dr. Paz believed so. Neuromesh readings suggested a latent circadian protocol and used because Terezinha's tropical calendar never voiced the cue. They would have to manufacture a season, 31 nights of orchestrated darkness, and chill, a synthetic winter. Lucinda's root brain might then embed a rest cycle. Risk, collapse, or adaptation? Theo voted yes. The engineered night. They commandeered the mirror dish array once more, but now to blackout. Panels swiveled sunbeam after sunbeam back to space. Polders of shade slid across the city. Solar furnaces throttled down, backup algae batteries hummed to keep hospital ventilators alive. From ice plants at the river they pumped coolant into rooftop misters, dropping ambient temperatures by 12 degrees. Children called it the month of dreaming. Streets glowed violet under bioluminescent fungi, couples danced where traffic once honked. Lucinda's spire dimmed, then quieted. Leaves folded like prayer wheels gone still. For days nothing grew, nothing spread, and an ache of doubt haunted every doorstep. Had they pruned the god into death? On night 29, sap pressure flatlined. Creaks echoed through the conservatory. Theo kept vigil, forehead against bark that felt colder than memory. He whispered every botanical lullaby he knew, ending with Dona Lucinda's charge, write something with this. At midnight between night 30 and day 1, the trunk shuddered. A single bud, no larger than a fingernail, uncurled at eye level, white this time, not green, its petal veined gold. It pulsed once like a newborn heartbeat, then stilled. Sensors went wild, root oscillations synchronized to a slower cadence, growth rate reduced but nutrient efficiency doubled. Lucinda had chosen restraint, weaving a winter gene into her algorithm. Dawn broke, gentle and honest. The city exhaled into balance. Seeds on the wind. With rhythm restored, Teresina distilled lessons into a manual of symbiotic urbanism, a living document etched on mycelium paper that sprouted forget-me-nots when chapters updated. Translations multiplied, Quechua, Yoruba, Sami, even sign language glosses recorded by deaf botanists under sapphire roofs. Lucinda's seeds continued to wander, but now couriers traveled with them, teaching host towns how to stage winters, craft dew condensers, and negotiate civic ecology. Not every place said yes. Some feared the vine and burned seedlings on arrival. Others spliced her genes into cash crops, stirring new arguments about equity. Yet dialogues flourished in the greenhouse heat of possibility. The oligarchic compact fractured. Some members accepted amnesty to join custodial guilds, bringing drone fleets refitted as pollinator monitors. A few diehards fled to orbital habitats, still vowing dominion, tiny kingdoms chasing sunsets around a planet busy rooting itself back together. Epilogue in Green Minor. Years later, on the anniversary of the engineered winter, Theo walked Teresina's riverfront. Buildings were living facades trimmed to frames of flowering restraint. Children sailed leaf-skin kites that harvested trace CO2 for algae balloons. Air smelled of wet stone and unpanicked future. He reached the original conservatory where Lucinda's trunk now rose like a cathedral pillar, rings of seasonal dormancy marking time better than calendars. The white gold bud had long ago matured into a lantern fruit used to light council meetings, its seeds carefully rationed served not as conquest but as invitations. Operative 8 greeted him beside the entrance, coat stitched with colorful graft patches from every biome she'd helped midwife. Envoys from the orbitals have docked, she said. Word is they're tired of stealing sunlight and want to negotiate shared spectrums. Theo smiled. Tell them we have practice at sharing dawn. He stepped inside. Voices rose, farmers, poets, former rivals, tomorrow's architects, arguing joyfully beneath canopies that listened. Lucinda's leaves rustled overhead like pages turning at the start of a new chapter no single hand could author alone. Theo placed his palm on the warm bark and felt the pulse, steady, reciprocal, never silent. The covenant held.